I knew that if I just quit processed foods or lower the amount of processed foods that I was having and then just find healthier alternatives or eating more whole foods, then eventually I would lose that weight. But now, because my goal has changed of losing fat and building muscle, the same thing that I did before is not going to apply now. So I wanted to share this video of the things that I learned when it came to tracking my food for 30 days, just in case you have been thinking of deciding to track your food because you've also hit like a plateau with your goals and wanting to see if this is a good option for you to do as well. So I didn't have like a weight scale. I was going to get a food scale, but I just didn't feel like paying that price. So I just ended up using an app called Lose It, and it could calculate your carb intake. It'll calculate your protein intake. It'll calculate your fiber. It does tell you like a recommended calorie intake. I didn't necessarily focus on that just because I knew I ate under the amount of calories that I should eat, because I just don't eat a lot throughout the day. So I'm just like, you know what, it is what it is. I'm not going to really focus on the calorie intake. My main goal was to only focus on the carb intake, my protein intake, and my fat intake. Another thing to do is also get a scale that tracks all of that. It's much more helpful than just having a regular scale, because muscle weighs more than fat, and you could actually be gaining muscle instead of gaining weight. So the first thing that I learned was that my food was not in balance. When I was just like focusing on losing weight, the main things that I just focused on was eating more whole foods, reducing my refined sugar intake, and increasing my fiber. I also did focus on reducing my refined carb intake. I didn't really focus on anything else. But then when I'm like learning about like toning your body and gaining muscle, especially after 30, of how important it is to focus on muscle building, because we lose muscle as women as we get older, especially starting in our 30s. So because I started to have a different set of goals that I was aiming for, I didn't realize like how out of balance my macros were. So in the beginning, when I first tracked it, I was very high in carbs, and then I was high in fat, and then I was the lowest in protein. And then as I started tracking even more, I started having like, I think I would have like 50% fat or 45% fat. And then I would have like 12 to like 20% protein, and then the rest carbs. And I didn't realize like how much of a high fat diet I was eating. And I also didn't realize like how much fat was in an avocado. I love me some avocados, especially when it comes to a salad. So one thing that I started being more intentional with was reducing my fat and increasing my protein. Another thing that I realized was how much fat eggs has in it, but it mainly comes from the yolk. But I am someone where eggs is just too damn expensive for me to do 2 whole eggs and an egg white. Like, I am just not throwing away an egg yolk. So instead, what I would do is have something with cottage cheese. That has been like a new addition of something that I've had. Like, I've never had cottage cheese. Like, I think I only had cottage cheese since for about like 2 months. And it actually isn't bad. And one thing that you can do to increase your protein without increasing the fat is add cottage cheese to your scrambled eggs. I did that once. I really didn't like it. I don't know why I didn't like it, but it didn't sit well with my stomach. I just didn't like it. But one thing that I did realize, like how much out of balance my diet was and how low in protein I was eating. So going to the next one is basically the same thing of what I stated in the first one, of realizing how low of a protein intake I was having. So again, like out of the whole macros, carbs, fat, and protein, my protein was the tiniest portion of what I was eating. And when I was first plant-based, I remember like everyone asking me about protein, and it was like, how are you going to get your protein? Where are you going to get your protein? And I was just like, why does everyone care so much about my damn protein? Like, I just didn't understand why people cared so much about how much protein I was taking in. And as I started going towards like this new journey of gaining muscle, then I started hearing from podcasts and YouTube channels that I would watch of why protein is so important. Number one, protein is important because it helps keep you full. And then the second thing is that it helps with muscle repair. So if you're low in protein, it's not going to work in your favor when you do workouts because you're not having the protein to then do its job when it comes to your workouts and muscle repair. So one thing that I had to start being more intentional with was increasing my protein. So one thing that I did, I started having meals where I prioritize what the protein is instead of what the fiber is. Because I would either just have my meals to where I would either have vegetables for the day or I would have a salad for the day. I would choose if I'm having rice or some type of noodles, but I never really focused a lot on the protein. And even when I look back at like my old meals that I used to make, I was not eating that much, especially when it came to like tofu. Like tofu would be like the smallest portion, not the smallest, but it wouldn't take up as much of my plate as everything else. And so one thing that I started to do was just make sure I prioritize protein in all of my meals, or at least out of 2 out of 3 meals. So when it comes to breakfast, my go-to is eggs. Like I love having eggs for breakfast. So I don't really have to think too much when it comes to protein when it comes to eggs. What I just do instead is decide if I want something else with it. So I'll either add more fiber where I'll have like an English muffin with avocado and some greens on top of that. If I know I'm not having it for dinner, I'll just change up the way that I'm having the eggs. I will just change up the way that I have my breakfast, but 9 times out of 10, I always have eggs. And if there are those random occasions where I decide to have like pancakes for breakfast, then I still just have eggs on the side just so I can make sure that I'm still getting the protein that I need and then still having like the sweet breakfast that I want. And what I did like about the app is that it also told me like when I ate certain foods, which was usually protein and avocados. When I would eat like certain types of food, it would tell me that I would eat less calories for the day. And it will tell you by how much you are reducing your calories from eating a certain type of food. And when I did eat things like chicken, like my protein intake would boost significantly up. So before, when I would have like chicken in my salads or if I would have chicken for like my bowls, I wouldn't put as much. But now I reorganize my plates where I'll still have the same meal, but I now put the protein as a big chunk of my meal instead of just like a side piece of my meal. And the last thing that I realized was changing how I eat has been much harder than changing what I eat. So I know for other people, like changing eating habits is hard because of like the way you grew up or your taste buds a certain way. For me, the way that I did it of changing how I ate was just changing out ingredients and then finding alternatives that match very similar to what I was eating. So I didn't necessarily find it hard of changing what I was eating because I was just being more aware of the alternatives that I could have instead without really losing out on the foods that I actually like and just being much more strategic with the foods I was choosing. So when I switched from a predominantly standard American diet to eating more whole foods, I found the process extremely fun because it taught me about new foods. I was exposed to things that I never heard of. I learned about health in a whole different way than what I had learned about of what I knew in the past. Things just became easier of being able to pinpoint what was healthy, what wasn't, and what I could get instead if I want this particular item. So changing what I ate wasn't necessarily difficult, but changing how I eat has been much more difficult. And I say that because it's like, because my goal before, again, was just losing weight, I knew that if I just quit processed foods or lower the amount of processed foods that I was having and then just find healthier alternatives or eating more whole foods, then eventually I would lose that weight because I'm not eating the same type of foods that I was before. But now, because my goal has changed of losing fat and building muscle, the same thing that I did before is not going to apply now. For now, it will just help me maintain my weight, which in and of itself, I'm happy with, because that took a long time of really trying to understand my body and being able to maintain my weight in my 30s as opposed to my 20s. Like, I feel confident in my eating habits because I know that I won't ever have to go back to that phase, because I know what works and what doesn't, and what is much more of a marketing tactic than actual like new health information. So when it came to now changing how I ate and trying to increase my protein and lower my fat, that has been much harder because what I'm eating is not necessarily unhealthy. It's just not in balance. And now it's like figuring out a way of changing that to where the foods that I eat are more in balance, to where I am increasing more of my protein and I'm eating the right amount of carbs and eating the right amount of fat. So I felt like I was just starting to get much more, not overwhelmed, but I felt like I was getting more stressed the more that I was trying to increase my protein. And I felt like my weight was like not going up significantly. Like, I'm still within a weight range that I want to be in, but I felt like the stress of trying to incorporate more protein just left me gaining weight, because I was so stressed that my body reacted to that stress and then affected my sleep and all that jazz. But I feel like it's like taking a slower pace of learning what works for my body, of being able to get to that goal, rather than trying to do everything at once. Because the more that I overwhelm myself with information of like trying to increase my protein, trying to reduce my carbs, trying to increase my fat, then that makes like the eating process much more draining and much more not fun than it would of if I just like focus on, okay, like how can I just increase my protein right now? Because then if I increase my protein, then the side effect is reducing my fat, or the side effect is reducing my carbs, rather than trying to focus on everything all together. So one thing that I've just been trying to do more so of now is just find different protein sources that I really enjoy, and just finding fun ways of incorporating them into my diet. So one thing that I want to do when it comes to a snack is I really love these Simple Mills crackers. They are honestly like the greatest crackers that I've had in a very long time. And I love the ingredients in them. I feel like I could eat that entire box in a day. Like, they are really good. But I do know, because it's still a processed food, that I always want to make sure I have some type of dip with it. So one thing that I work on is, instead of prioritizing like a high fat dip that I would usually have, which is like peanut butter or avocado, I'm now thinking of different protein dips that I could have for it. So I want to make like a chicken salad, and then I have like a chicken salad dip with it. Or I think beans is also high in protein, and have like a plant protein that I could have as a dip, rather than focusing on high fat. So I really think that when it comes to tracking what you eat, I feel like it comes at a certain phase of where you are in your journey. I think when you're at like the beginning of your phase, beginning of like a weight loss journey, I think it doesn't really necessarily I don't think you really necessarily need to focus on tracking what you eat. I think you can if you want to, but I think if it's more so of just you prioritizing eating natural foods and whole foods, that will automatically be a benefit in your favor. But now for me, of having the goal of really trying to tone my stomach, the things that I did in the past aren't necessarily going to be the things that work in the future. It'll still work of me maintaining my weight, but when it comes to wanting to tone my body, then that's not necessarily going to work for this new phase. And I have to now be cautious and more intentional about what I'm eating, but making sure I could do it in a way that is sustainable and enjoyable. Because one thing I don't want to do is like, I don't want to eat like broccoli, rice, and chicken all day just to have a fucking six pack. Like, no, like, I'm like, you know what? If I have a 4-pack, I'm fine with that, but I'm not going to have a basic meal. Like, I really enjoy having good food that looks good, that tastes good, and that I enjoy making. And I could still enjoy the process of being a foodie and loving certain foods and having good, tasty, beautiful looking meals without sacrificing that just to get the body that I want. Like, for the most part, like, my main goal is to just be as healthy as I can and have the amount of energy that I want. And then everything else is much more of like a superficial base. So I'm like, I'm not trying to sacrifice the things that I really love just for this like superficial outcome that I want. Like it has to be like a balance. So I just wanted to share what I learned from tracking what I ate for 30 days. If you're someone who has been thinking about tracking what you're eating, hopefully this inspires you of if it's something that you should do or if it's something you want to do in the future. Again, I do think that depending on what your goals are, I don't think necessarily tracking is necessary. So I did just want to share what I learned from tracking what I ate for 30 days. I hope you found this video valuable, gave you some insight on what to expect if you're thinking about tracking for 30 days. If you have tracked what you've eaten for a certain amount of time and the things that you've learned along your own journey, definitely share it in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one.